All right, Esther chapter 6, let's call this a recipe for relief. 1 cup honor, drawing on Jesus' principle from the Sermon on the Mount. With the measure we use, it will be measured back to us, because in this chapter, on the same night in which Haman had gallows built on which to hang Mordecai, the king is not going to be able to sleep. And he is going to have the book of the Chronicles, or their book of the Chronicles, read to him, at which point they're going to come across that time when Mordecai had actually had a role in stopping a plot on the king's life, at which point the king is going to ask, what was done for Mordecai? To which they're going to respond, nothing. And he is going to, ironically enough, have Haman coming to ask for Mordecai's life right around the same time. But before Haman can get a word out, they're going to usher him in, and the king is going to ask Haman a question. What should be done for the man whom the king decides to honor? Haman, thinking that, well, who would the king want to honor more than me, goes on this long spiel about this great dramatic demonstration of parading the man through one of the town squares. And the king is going to stop him and say, do exactly that for Mordecai, which at this point is probably going to get Haman's attention. But in the meantime, he's simply sick at the fact that the honor that he had heaped up in measure for himself, he is now going to have to give that same measure of honor to Mordecai, the man he hates. And so after pouring that ample measure of honor on Mordecai in exchange for Mordecai's honorable deed, he is going to go home himself mourning, ironically enough, understanding all the mourning Haman had caused to the children of Israel now in captivity in Persia. But as he goes home, he's going to once again assemble his support group. And this time the news isn't going to be so good, because he is going to let them know all that he had to do in honor of Mordecai, this time letting them know that he's a Jew. And they're going to be like, oh, you left out an important fact, because just as you've begun to fall before Mordecai, it's only going to get worse. And as they are talking, the king's eunuchs are going to come to take Haman away to the feast, barely giving him time, in my paraphrase, to get his thoughts together for any kind of response, even if it mattered. And the short amount of time that Haman is given to prepare himself to be taken to the day 2 feast is going to be an interesting contrast to the amount of time that Mordecai had to wait before being praised for saving the king's life, which reminded me, in life, it can be tough to wait for praise to come for praiseworthy accomplishments. Saving somebody's life is something worth praising, but you're not always going to get the praise or the pat on the back for good things that you've done right away. Understand, though, even though, once again, God is not literally mentioned in this passage, he was mentioned in the life of another great man in Israel who had to wait for his praise, that being Joseph, who ironically enough ended up becoming second in command of Egypt, in much the same way that Mordecai, in a few chapters, is going to become second in command in Persia. And one of the things they both have in common is the way that they had to wait to be praised at a time when it really mattered. See, because after Joseph had done a favor for one of the king's officials in jail, that official forgot him until the time when Joseph's skill set really mattered. And so at a time when the king was perplexed and really needed him, Joseph came through in a way that not only got him honor, but it got him the kind of honor that got him a promotion. Likewise, Mordecai, he might not have cared at all about being praised for saving the king's life, but in waiting for praise, it came at a time when it really mattered. Understanding that it's not simply going to be mentioned here, it's going to be mentioned in the next chapter at a point when the king is going to decide not only to save Mordecai's life, but the lives of all of the Jews throughout Persia. And so maybe understand the interesting contrast between Haman, a man who was constantly seeking praise and recognition for himself, never being able to accumulate enough praise to overcome all the dirt that he did to the people of Israel. And so he really got all this honor in vain because it couldn't save his life. In contrast, Mordecai, not chasing praise or honor, simply sat back and received it at a time when it mattered, as we'll see in the next chapter, where the honor is not only going to save his life, but the lives of his people.